Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of July 31st. I'm still Michael James, your host. I'm up here in Chicago's very blue 49th Ward. And as those of you who are regular listeners or viewers to the show know, we care about politics. We care about what's going on in the world. And we have been turned on to a fellow who really has his eye in his ears. He's got the pulse of what's happening in elections and gives you direction on where you might want to donate money to help a certain candidate through to the finish line. And I think that's real important. So I'm encouraging my viewers and listeners to spread this segment of this week's show around so that Oath, which is the organization that our guest Brian Derrick has founded and is head of, and they really do tell you where to put the money. So good day to you, Brian. It's good to have you back. I hope we get you a couple more times in the next 100 days.
Absolutely, Michael. I'm happy to be here anytime. Thanks so much for having me on.
So how about you tell us, our listeners and viewers, a little bit about Oath, how it came to be, what you do, and your success rate?
Absolutely. We launched Oath back in the 2022 cycle because after a career in campaign finance, I was way too familiar with how much money Democrats were lighting on fire every election because we were giving to candidates that weren't going to be able to turn those dollars into wins. We set out to create a platform that was free to use, where any donor could find the races where their dollars would actually make a difference between winning and losing. And we've done just that. We have directed over $100 million to campaigns in the last 4 years. And to your question, we have an incredible ability to pinpoint where the margins are going to be the closest and helping people move dollars to those races where fundraising might be the thing that determines whether a candidate wins or loses. So overall for the platform, about 70% of donations go to a race that is decided by less than 5%, which we're very proud of.
How do you, what's your process for figuring this stuff out?
We rely really heavily on our own impact score to put out our recommendations. It's a very simple 0 to 10 metric that tells you not which race is most important or which race is the most competitive, but a comprehensive look at where will dollars move the needle from a probability of losing to a probability of winning. And to do that, we look at 3 metrics: the competitiveness of a race, the stakes of winning or losing a particular election, and financial need. So how much has the candidate raised? How much do we think that they need to win? How much does their opponent have? And we factor all of these things in to a very simple summary in that 10-point impact score. But that is really what guides the algorithm of the entire platform and how we're able to make the recommendations that we do.
Well, you make a lot of recommendations, and you do, you do very local races. Yeah, you like focusing on local. You also talk a lot about the courts, and of course, you do touch on national races too. You know, a lot of us right now are concerned with national races around, the House and certainly the Senate. But how about why don't we start on the lowest level on courts and local elections and why they're so important and probably will become more important in the years to come as long as we're still having elections.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's heard the saying, all politics is local. I think that we would love to sort of put forth that all local politics is national, that it really matters what happens locally in Wisconsin to the rest of us, because if Republicans in Wisconsin are using their power to gerrymander the state and block Democrats from reaching Congress, and that prevents Democrats from reaching a majority in the House of Representatives, that impacts all of us. And it's really those state legislative races in Wisconsin or wherever that could end up being that deciding factor or tipping point. So we have to look all levels of the ballot, all 50 states, which is a different differentiator for Oath. We're not narrowing down, we're expanding. We're saying we want to find all the races that matter everywhere. We go down, as you said, to the local level. We're really big on court races. The state Supreme Courts decide more than 95% of the cases that do climb to that level versus the federal Supreme Court, which obviously we don't elect members of and don't have the ability to shift the majority right now. But we can change the reality of the basic human rights of people, millions of people living across the country, when courts decide on cases involving things like abortion access and LGBT equality in their states. And it affects our elections dramatically, because as our election infrastructure is under attack from Donald Trump and his allies who seek to undermine people's trust and participation in our elections, state Supreme Courts play a really important role in making sure that every ballot gets counted appropriately, and that the winners are in fact seated in the office that they belong. And so many of those, not all, but many of those courts are elected by popular vote. And so we want to highlight where we have the potential to shift the ideological balance of a Supreme Court or protect a pro-democracy majority on a court that could be instrumental in 2028 when it comes to potential threats to the election.
Brian Derrick, let's pursue that a little more. Wisconsin had, in the last year or two, has had 2 Supreme Court elections and has shifted the ideological situation there. One of the questions I was going to ask was about more progressive or democratic socialists being on the ballot and maybe winning a primary, but doesn't look so good in the general election. Let's take a peek at Wisconsin, where there's a woman named Hong, who is a progressive. I don't know if she's a democratic socialist or not, but she's leading in the, it looks like in the Democratic primary. What's your take on that and how she looks if she wins and going forward?
Well, I think there are 2 dynamics at play at the same time. One is that there is certainly an anti-establishment energy in the country right now. And there's a lot of organizing and mobilization around a generational change and a strategy shift. It's most prevalent and most reported on in the Democratic Party. It also exists right now in the Republican Party, where you see longtime Republican incumbents losing their elections to insurgents as well. And so we have that dynamic is definitely raising the salience of primary elections that you're talking about. The second dynamic that I would put forth is that most of the candidates that are being identified as farther left or DSA aligned are winning in races where there are many candidates splitting the vote, therefore lowering the threshold required to advance, either to advance to the general or to win an election outright. It's not all of them. There are definitely head-to-head matchups where a progressive DSA aligned candidate has come out on top, the Colorado being a really good example of that. But in others, there are sometimes sort of so many candidates that someone's winning with 30% or so of the vote. And that's partially what's happening here in Wisconsin in the race that you're talking about, the primary for governor, where you have 6, they've been dropping out and getting back in. So it's hard to keep an exact count, but let's say 6 to 8 candidates that are running and sort of splitting the vote, leaving Francesca Hong as the current leader in most polls after Sarah Rodriguez dropped out. There is concern there, right? To win a general election, you have to win the median voter that turns out in that race. And so you have to have a strategy that is going to be able to correctly identify who that median voter is and win their trust enough that they're going to pull the ticket for you at the ballot box. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but for a DSA aligned candidate or for a far left candidate to do that. But it's certainly not been the traditional approach to flipping districts when we've seen that happen successfully, whether we're talking about the House or a statewide election like governor in the last 10 to 15 years.
Well, that's an argument that's going on in my circles. Who do you root for? What really can happen? I tend to want to root for whoever's the furthest left and hope for the best. But we have to get strategic. Let's flip here a little bit to the House, which the Democrats are favored to win back. Maybe talk a little bit about that before I go into some specific questions around Senate candidates.
The House is must win in 2026 for Democrats. If you're someone who's concerned about the current trajectory of the country, about what the Trump administration is doing, the House has to be the priority. There's a clearer path to flipping the House than the Senate, which I'm sure we're going to just get into the weeds of shortly. But winning the House makes all the difference in whether Democrats are able to block more legislation that resembles the big, beautiful bill that Trump passed with tax cuts for billionaires, $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, et cetera. It also gives them subpoena power so that they can investigate what many would consider to be the corruption of the Trump administration, his business dealings, what his family is doing, and gives them a lot more power in bringing to light what is happening in our government right now, abuses, things like investigations into ICE and otherwise. So House is must win. What you're asking is, can Democrats do that? Republicans have done everything they can to make it hard for Democrats to flip the House.
Voter suppression is rampant. The redistricting. It's just unbelievable to me how quickly it happened and how little resistance really so far. But hopefully we have some good signs.
Yeah, that's right. And we have new maps that we're fighting against, or fighting an uphill battle against, I should say, in Florida and Texas, Ohio, Missouri, North Carolina. After Donald Trump demanded it, Republicans did a bang up job of gerrymandering as many seats as they could. Democrats cut into that somewhat through California and Utah and other places, but we have a clear path to win, even despite all of that, even despite the sort of tomfoolery going on the right. We still have a path. By our estimation, at oath, the clearest strategy is to win more than 90% of seats that lean Democratic, more than 70% of the seats that are toss-up seats, 50-50, and at least 20% of the seats that lean away from us towards Republicans. And so that is the math. If as long as we do those three things, then we will win a majority, no matter what happens with the gerrymandering. And so
90%, 70%, and 20%.
We call it our 90-70-20 plan. That's exactly right. Okay. And we've been directing donors as needed to the individual races where funding gaps remain, that will maximize the odds of winning that 90%, 70%, 20%, and ensuring that Democrats reclaim the House, which we believe they are favored to do.
Do you have any Democratic races for the House that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, there's a lot where Democrats are being outraised, where we are advising contributions immediately to get the campaigns built out. Kate Conley running in New York, Manny Rutinel in Colorado, Bob Brooks running in Pennsylvania. The list certainly goes on. I would probably add Joanna Mendoza in there in Arizona, though I don't believe she's being outraised anymore. We have some really high quality candidates, and more competitive primaries are settled in Wisconsin and Michigan in the next couple of weeks.
Well, how about we switch to the Senate? And I made a list of states and sometimes a name, and I'll just go down, and if you've got the information, share it. What is your take on the much publicized and very carefully watched race for the Senate seat in Maine, where Troy Jackson, the logger, is going up against the Republican incumbent? What's your take on that one?
It's a bit of a redux of 2024, right? Where we have about 100 days for a new candidate to flip. It wasn't a flip in 24, but to win this highly competitive race, which is a really big challenge. It's rare that Oath is advising donors to give to U.S. Senate races this late in the cycle because many of them are very well funded. And even if they're going to be close, another $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 probably won't change the outcome in some of them, which you'll hear me say more. But in Maine, that is not the case. You have a new candidate who has no money, who has no infrastructure, who has a tall task of ousting a longtime incumbent, but is very doable in this political environment. So I would say, based on the data that we are seeing, which is still, it's really premature because Troy just got into the race, but we would say that Susan Collins is favored, but that it is winnable. And so we are advising people who are looking for where to put dollars. If you want to back a U.S. Senate race, that Troy Jackson would be a good one to do now.
North Carolina looks good for the Democrats with the former governor running, right?
Yes, it does. Roy Cooper, one of the most popular governors in the country when he left office, and Republicans haven't been able to slow him down even a little bit. So they're running Michael Whatley there, and he hasn't found much traction. So we would also put Cooper as favored in that race.
One of the guys I've always liked is Sherrod Brown, and I'm wondering how that one is looking. With a lot of people are hoping he's coming through.
I'm a fellow Midwesterner. I'm from Ohio and am a Buckeye. Go Bucks.
And do you vote in Ohio?
No, I've been in New York far too long for that. I know. I'm like going on 11 years in New York. So we have our own problems here that I have to vote on and deal with. But Sherrod Brown is one of the original, what I would consider like moderate populists. He is laser focused on economic issues. He talks about jobs and wages and jobs and wages and healthcare and jobs and jobs. That's what he is all about, what he's always been about. And in this current political environment, compared to 2024, when he lost his race for Senate, we think that he is in much better position. He's also running against a appointed incumbent, someone who wasn't elected to the seat, but came there by appointment. And so we think that he definitely has a strong shot at it, but we have to also acknowledge that Ohio has moved, to my chagrin, has moved pretty far away from Democrats in recent cycles. Trump typically clears it by 8 points. But
is that true? Is it also true, Ohio, for the governor's race?
Yeah. Amy Acton, my former professor at Ohio State,
work for her.
Is running for governor. Elon Musk just dumped more than $10 million into that race behind Vivek Ramaswamy, which I think actually could end up working against him, as we saw in the race that you brought up earlier in Wisconsin, that when Elon Musk, the world's first trillionaire, wades into a race to try to buy it for someone, there's a backlash from voters. So we with that additional information, are currently rating that as a toss-up. So Ohio is up for grabs, both on the gubernatorial and for the Senate seat, but with Sherrod Brown doing better than the gubernatorial Amy Acton in most polling.
Okay, let's take a peek at the great state of Michigan, where I always thought it was a kind of a liberal state, with the United Auto Workers, but clearly there's a house divided, so to speak, up there. And we have a race between a centrist Democrat, Representative Haley Stevens, going up against this health official who's pretty dynamic, Abdul Assayad. And that's we really want to win Michigan. What is your sense of that race, Brian?
Yeah, I'm like, if there was a pass button, I would hit pass. This is a really messy one. It's really messy. There is no path to the Senate majority in 26 without keeping the Michigan seat. This is Gary Peters retiring, creating an open seat. We have to win in Michigan for there to be any path, but it's also really important for our odds in 2028 that we're holding this seat. Because remember, Senate terms are 6 years. And so you're right. It's a two-way race. Mallory McMorrow dropped out splitting between a moderate Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed, who's seen as a progressive populist. A huge portion of the conversation there has been about Israel and AIPAC spending in the race and the differences there. It was a big issue for Harris in Michigan in 2024, and I don't think that has gone away. Currently, I'll just stick into the data. El-Sayed is up in vast majority of polling that we see that is legitimate, that is verifiable and high quality polling. More recent has shown his numbers growing. So as of right now, this coming week, we're expecting him to be the primary winner, barring a surprise. And that is going to putting the November election in play for sure. That it's a Fetterman type of election, as we've seen in Pennsylvania. Like, you can have a populist win in the blue wall in a hard to win swing state, but
it's hard to trust them though.
It is a hard thing to do, and it's certainly there's definitely not a playbook that's been run many times successfully that you can lean on. And so, we need to be focused on Michigan. That's not one that we can take for granted, but it is winnable either way. We believe Democrats are popular in Michigan overall, relatively speaking, and that either of these candidates can win that race, but it's not going to be easy.
We're going to run. I got 5 minutes left here, my son tells me. Right. So I'm going to whip through them. Iowa is a long shot, I assume, but this guy named Josh Turek and MS Now as of yesterday, had him leading. Any chance to that it becomes the truth?
There is a chance there. We haven't elected a statewide Dem in Iowa, to the Senate specifically, in a long time. But the combination of Josh Turek running for the Senate seat and Rob Sand, great candidate running for governor, is juicing that state. And then you also have things like the tariffs and a lot of Trump's economic policy that has hurt farmers and industry in Iowa in unique ways that is also making it really competitive across the state. That's why we have 3 competitive congressional seats in Iowa as well. So Iowa's kind of the under the radar center of the political universe this cycle, and he definitely has a shot.
What about Nebraska with Ricketts, his family owns the Cubs, not the White Sox? And what about him running against Dan Osborne?
Yeah, we've seen a proliferation of independents running, and in some places, the Democratic Party maneuvering to ensure that there's a one-on-one matchup between an independent and a Republican, where the party brand has been damaged enough that a Democrat's not viable. We see it as, again, uphill for sure, but competitive. He overperformed Harris by more than any other Senate candidate, brought it within 6 points last cycle, is running it back in a more favorable environment than we had in 2024 with enthusiasm among Trump supporting voters down. So competitive, certainly.
How about Texas and Alaska? We got a good shot there.
Alaska is very high on our list for potential flips. Mary Peltola held statewide, or has won statewide there before, and has moved that from what was originally a likely Republican rating across the board from everyone to now being a toss-up by major prognosticators. That very rarely happens. It's a big deal. She's also doing extremely well in fundraising. So lots of exciting news and opportunity in Alaska. Call me Talarico. I'm on the Talarico train for sure. I'm a believer, but I also know that Democrats have spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to flip Texas with very little to show for it in the last handful of elections there. So more important than whether he can win or not, I think, is how well funded he is already. So to the point of our goal is to move money where it matters, that is not a race where an additional even $1 million is going to change whether he wins or loses.
I was going to ask you about South Carolina and Kentucky, but we're out of time. And I know I just always have hope for South Carolina because It's open now, and there's a large black population. I just don't know how many liberal or progressive Democrats there are. And Kentucky, we like Bashir a lot. I don't know what's going to happen there. We'll save that for the next time. It's so great to have you on, Brian, and I'm really glad you committed on air that you would come back. So I'll be in touch, and I want to thank